Welcome to another episode of the Impossible Life Podcast. I'm your co-host, Nick Surface, and I'm looking across at a man whose dying wish is to be cremated and put into a munitions shell so his last act can be to blow up a terrorist. That's right, friends, the former Navy SEAL. Garrett Unkelbach, a man who will fight evil even after death.
It's pretty close to true. I'd actually, if like I died tomorrow, I'd like for my ashes to just be shot into outer space.
Is this like a legally binding thing that we have your voice and video of you saying that? Because not that you're going to die tomorrow. I hope not, but just saying.
If I could really have my wish, just fire me into a black hole.
Is that actually what you'd wish?
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
I think you'd probably try and reassemble yourself and appear in another timeline.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh man, this is the virtual what could be possible episode of The Impossible Life. Awesome. No, actually it's not. So last week we talked about how to really win in life, G, which was very much like a long time frame orientation.
Yep.
The finish line for this life was death. Well, don't worry, guys. We don't want you to just win eventually. We want you to win right now. So I was like, man, we were talking about it
because when I look at win as like the point at which you peak.
Right.
You don't want to be the guy who peaked in high school. I also don't want to peak in my 30s.
Yeah, exactly right.
Right. So like the point at which you're preparing, like you go through a cycle in your life where like you prepare to peak essentially at a point. You can pick the wrong time.
Right. Well, that's a whole other tidbit. And once again, I'm not going to go down that thought process because it's a very interesting one. But like so many people, I know that they'll be in a place where they're like, dude, I just need to make things better right now. Well, good. This is the episode for you. We're going to tell you how to make things better right now, unlock your next level, and get moving.
I think everybody would like to go to their next level.
Yeah, well, I hope you would.
Or at least know what it's going to take to get to your next level.
And that's exactly what we're
know
going to
where
do.
you are on the level that you're on.
Yeah, so just to let you know where we're heading this episode so you can stay with us, we're going to show you exactly what the growth cycle looks like. We're going to break it down. There's 3 phases to it. You will see it at play. We'll give you examples of that. And then we're going to tell you exactly what you need to do with practical examples to your marriage, your finances, your health, all the big things so that you can move from being stuck to like, oh, I'm getting progress.
Somebody out there right now saying this sounds too good to be true.
They probably are. Well, just stay tuned. We'll get right back. No, yeah, I mean, it does sound too good to be true, but gee, we always set ourselves to do things based on principles, right?
That's right.
So we're never coming in going like, hey, we found this quick hack. And like, if you just do this in this exact scenario, it works. We're always trying to give you the mindset that applies to every scenario, which is what principles do. So anyways, we'll get into that. Well, we're going to get into the growth cycle like I talked about, G, and I'm fortunate enough because as you call me your sports guy friend, which...
Sportsman.
Yeah, sportsman. I still don't know if that's an insult, but I just sort of take it. And so as a result, I've gotten to work with a lot of professional baseball players. And the interesting thing about this, you talk about growing and unlocking your next level and how you can win right now. Baseball players go through this. The thing that makes baseball different than any other sport is it has a very large minor league system. And only 8% of the people that enter the minor league system ever make it to the pros.
Okay.
So it's a very unique game in that result. So like a lot of guys will get drafted out of high school. And you think, so like there's a guy who's actually...
Wow, what percentage, I'm sure you know, what percentage of people who get drafted go straight to majors versus get drafted and sent to the minors?
Well, nobody goes straight to majors. No, literally it's nobody.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Everyone goes to the minor leagues.
I didn't know that.
No, because it's such a massive jump. And that's why it's such a great picture of life. So one of the best baseball players in baseball right now is a guy named Bobby Witt Jr., who's actually a Dallas native. I signed him for...
So even guys like Ohtani, like they played in the minors.
Well, Ohtani was already pro. So this is like...
He's pro in Japan.
He was pro in Japan, so he came over. Yeah, so that's a slightly different one. I love that you're still pushing on that. Is there any other... I'm
just trying to understand.
Okay, well, I like that. Sportsman is here for you. Maybe we could do this off the air. I don't know. What do you think?
That's probably good.
Okay, I just, So anyways... So as I was saying, Bobby Witt Jr. finished second overall for MVP voting, won a Gold Glove, led the league in batting average last year in the AL, had an absolute phenomenal year. Well, the cool thing is I've met Bobby for the first time when he was a senior, heading into his senior year in high school. He's based locally here in Dallas, and I actually signed him to a contract for the company I was working with once he got out of high school because NIL and all that sort of stuff didn't happen. So it was really interesting. So I got to watch his journey, and it's so indicative of what so many guys is like. So he gets out of high school. He won the Gatorade Player of the Year in high school. He was on the front of Sports Illustrated as a senior in high school.
Wow.
So and he won the state championship. I mean, it's everything that you think like what a stud, right?
You think you're the next Michael Jordan?
Yeah, you are. I mean, he was in a Gatorade professional commercial. Like it's not like they just took a picture of him from like his mom's iPhone. They sent out a whole crew. They did a professional shoot. Like he's buzzing, man. Like he's blowing up. So his reward is he gets drafted number 2 overall, gets like a nice $8 million contract, which is guaranteed. So great. In some people's minds, that's like, wow, you just won. Well, he goes to the minors, and I was talking to him about this. His very first pitch in the minors was from a guy who was from the Dominican Republic, because they throw all the potential into one spot, and it's called rookie ball. And you get to play other rookies who are trying to prove themselves just like you are. His first pitch was 100 miles per hour, and it went behind him. So just think about
That's
that.
awesome.
You've been in high school where you're teeing off on dudes who are maybe throwing in the 80s.
Yeah.
And then suddenly this guy who speaks a different language than you throws 100 miles per hour and it sails behind you, and you're like, oh, buddy, I'm not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah, that's
right.
awesome.
And so then you have to work your way up from rookie ball to single A to high A. And
That's one way to set a precedence as a pitcher.
yeah, exactly. Guess what? I have no control.
You can throw the next one right down the middle, and they're just going to
Exactly.
flinch.
I've got a lot of power, no control. Good luck. Well, that's where you can't have any self-preservation. But the point being, there's 6 levels of minor leagues that you move up in, because there's so many different levels of A,
Okay.
of single A ball. And then you go to double A, then you go to triple A, then you finally get to the big show, right? And so you go through all these different areas, and guess what? You can look at guys' stats. A guy will, when they first get to rookie ball, guys usually struggle. Sometimes you get these anomalies that get really hot, but even still, they then always have to go up to the next level. And guess what happens? As soon as they get there, oh man, you were crushing
I thought
it.
I was good.
Yeah, I thought I was great. Oh, you know what? There's actually another level. Oh, good. Now I adapted to this one. Ooh, well, that's great. We're going to move you. Ooh, right? And that's how it goes. And eventually you get to the point.
Kind of like life.
Exactly. And we all know this quote. So think about this, because I'm sure you've all used this about a boss that you've had to work with. You get promoted to your level of incompetency, right? That's the quote that we know. We always use it for other
Most
people.
people say it as in a negative way.
Right. And usually about someone else. How many people have said, you know what? I just got promoted to my level of incompetency. I've never heard anyone say yeah, that's me.
Well, the day that you get promoted should be your most incompetent day on that job.
Correct. Now, I would love to hear your thoughts on incompetency, because I feel like sometimes people make it sound like it's a be-all and end-all disease. Once you have it, you can't cure it.
There's a big difference between being incompetent and having incompetencies.
Ooh, please continue.
Being incompetent, it'd be a state of being, and I don't ever want to be described as incompetent. But even in my areas of skill and profession, I have incompetencies.
Right.
Areas that there's things that I don't understand well or that I don't perform well.
Very, very good. Yeah, so I knew you'd have some. I didn't know what you were going to say. I just knew you would have a take on incompetency. But so here's the thing. So we're going to talk about how to go to your next level. First thing, what's next level? Well, for you and for most people, your next level is, man, whatever it is. Let's say it's something financial, because I think that's an easy one for people. Dude, I'm rolling. I got all this extra money. I can do anything I want.
Well, every entrepreneur, if you start as a solopreneur, you start as a salesman.
Yes.
So you got to sell your business. Okay,
Right.
Step 1, right? Then okay, maybe you're good at that. Great. You get to the second part is oh, well, I have to perform what I sold. New level, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe you figure that part out. And then the third part is I have to actually, understand my income, my sales cycle, my expenses, my taxes, all of these things, right? New incompetency. And so anyone who's been a entrepreneur that started as a solopreneur, if you didn't have partners that did some of these areas, that means you did all 3 of those things at one point. And I promise you, however smart you are, if you were once a solopreneur entrepreneur, you sucked at one of those 3 things.
100%. But that's what I mean. So the next level, why people get into starting their own business is because they want more freedom. That's probably the number one thing people say. I want to make more money and have more freedom so I can have time with my kids or whatever. And those are all very good things. I don't knock those. I think they're noble causes. I would relate to that. So what you think is, you're like, man, I'm going to start this, and then what's going to happen?
I mean, I think, everyone wants that form of freedom. I was listening to someone talk about freedom today, and we don't have, the typical form of slavery that we used to have, at least not in America. I know it does still exist in some places in the world, but everything in America is debt slavery.
Right.
Right. And so that's where the opposite of debt slavery is financial freedom.
Yes.
That's what we're all after.
Yeah. Kanye West got in a lot of trouble for saying something similar to that in very different terms.
Yeah.
But
He's not the best with his words from a being understood standpoint.
Yeah, but you know what?
He's a master of words in other ways.
He got a reaction, and if that's what he's looking
That's what he
for, he's
wanted.
very good at it.
That's what he wanted.
But what I was saying in saying that whole example is we think our next level is what I just painted. I'm going to have financial freedom and have all this time.
Right.
And what
Right.
your next level is actually your next incompetence. Right? It's not that what you're describing as your next level, and what I just said is 50 levels later.
Mm-hmm.
You have a bunch of little next levels in there where your next level is you not knowing what
Most
to do.
people think okay, my next level is become an entrepreneur.
Right.
And the level after that is I make all the money.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's 1,000 levels between those
Right.
two levels.
Yeah, weight loss. I mean, yo, I'm going to get jacked. Next level for you means you're probably going to lose 5 pounds. What? Wait, no. But what about all the muscles? Yeah, give it a few years.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you said how long? Yeah, that's so your next level means you're going to get a little stronger, lose a little bit of fat, right? And so the point I'm making, it's not what you think. Your next level is when you get to the next place and you're stuck and you're going, I don't know what to do. I just uncovered a whole new set of problems and I feel, where do I go? That's really what your next level is.
I read someone talking about this. And they had some evidence for it, but it seemed good. They're talking about how like seeing change in the gym, or seeing change in your body takes 200 to 300 hours in the gym.
Oh my gosh!
So
Wow.
just do that. Hey, if you work out 3 times a week for 30 minutes, it's going to take you a while to get there. If you work out every day for an hour, you get there a lot faster.
Huh? Well, that's encouraging. I haven't heard it quantified like that. That's kind of cool. I got to go. I'll go work out. But anyway, so the point. So in all this, there is a growth cycle, and this is where we're going to break it down so you can figure out where you're at, and also understand what this. Ray Dalio actually did this thing. I think he called it failing forward.
Yeah.
And it's like an upward looking curl. If you can think of like how you would draw a curl, it goes up and then it loops back on itself and then it ends up higher up. That is the actual growth cycle. That's what it actually looks like.
Or if you're thinking about like a stock chart and you picked a good stock, there's highs and lows.
Right.
And the highs get higher and the lows aren't as low as they were before.
That's exactly, yeah. And that's actually what growth looks like. So the first phase is that you would have a dream, right? And this is where you just get clear about something you want.
You got to know what you want.
Right.
And it's not just like have an idea of
Right.
like, I want to be a pro athlete.
Yeah.
That's like step 1 of 100 steps of clarity.
Right.
You've got to get a lot more specific than that. But if you don't know what you want, you are literally stuck.
Yeah.
Until you look at your life as like, you're sitting there in the car and you have a GPS. Until you tell it where you want to go, you're just going to sit in the parking lot. You're going to sit in your driveway.
Yeah, I always think it's so fascinating for how hard it is for adults to tell you what they want. Like you have kids, I have kids. I always say to people, if I ask my kids what they want on any given time, they could spend every cent I'll ever make for the rest of my life, virtually every month. Because they, when you're a kid, what do you want? Well, I want this toy, I want that toy, I want to go here. They know so many things they want. You ask an adult what you want. And so, PK has a great leadershipology. He says most people don't know what they want, so they end up getting a lot more of what they don't want.
You ask your wife, what does she want for dinner? Where do you want to go eat?
Right.
Don't ask her that. Ask her, what do I want?
Is that actually the right question?
No, sometimes it's the tactic.
Okay, well, that's a bold bonus tip for you on the impossible life. So great. So you got this dream. You're clear about something you want. What comes next, G? Of course, the next step in the growth cycle is failure. Oh, right. It's not what you thought. And here's what this phase feels like. It's frustration. You feel stalled. You feel like, as they say in England, you've hit the glass ceiling, right? And this is the part that it will absolutely drive you crazy because you don't actually know what you're bumping up against.
And so many people take failure, and if you listen to this podcast, it's not you, right? If you've been listening long enough, and we throw nuggets in here and we talk about some things that sometimes in the pre-show, Nick and I know, like, hey, this is for the people that have been around for a little bit. This might not mean as much to other people, but failure could be something for you that when you hear it, like it's like it creates a response in you that makes you uncomfortable. Like I don't want to do that. That's not me. Right. And everyone fails. Yeah. Right. There's a difference 100%. Between you've failed and being a failure. We're not talking about being a failure in life. You're going to fail. And on the path to success, you're going to fail. Michael Jordan talked about failing. So don't like shy away from failures. Like, not in my path. Right. Yes, you're going to fail. And a fail is where, hey, I'm trying to make a free throw and the ball doesn't go in.
You missed the mark.
Right. You're not going to bat 1,000 for your entire life.
Yeah.
You're not going to make every single shot that you ever take. And so in your dream, you're going to have this idea like, this is what I want. I've got clarity. I'm going to lose this much weight by this much time, and it's more important to me than these things, and I'm going to do this and this and this. And you set out to do it, and it doesn't work the way that you intended, right? You either make a mistake or you miscalculated or you overshot, you undershot, right? You're going to fail.
Yeah. And it's failure is a gift. I think about So many times whenever you're in a tough situation, it forces you to look at things that you've been taking for granted and figure them out. And that is a massive gift because the lessons that you learn now are the things that you're going to stand on in your next level. And it's really important that you stop to learn your lessons, because if you've got your dream, then you hit failure. Of course, like we said, this is growth. This isn't the finality. This is growth. So you're going to have recovery. That's the third phase. So you dream, you fail, then you recover. This is when you figure it out. And guess what? Now you've actually entered the next level.
Failure is a teacher. The recovery is you putting that learning into place, right? Thomas Edison talked about it, right? The 28,000 ways to fail were 28,000 ways not to make a light bulb.
Yeah, 9,009. It said it took him 10,000 attempts to make a light bulb. He didn't fail. He figured 9,999 ways not to make a light bulb. And I love that. And here's the great thing. I always say, like, when you finally get that dream, whatever it may be, let's say you dream to make $100,000, right? So you go for it and you thought you were going to make it this year, and then it didn't work out. And you start assessing yourself. Why didn't I make it? Was it my approach? Whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're working at a job, you
could have had all the level of effort, but you picked the wrong product. You didn't understand your market.
Yes.
There's so many. I mean, gosh, I feel like I've come a long way in the last 10 years in my understanding of business, but all the time I'm still learning new things.
Yeah.
It's like, man, that's something I'm really glad I know now, so I don't fail on that. And wherever you're at in life, you're going to encounter things. It's like, man, I didn't know this. But the right thing for you to do is learn from it and grow from it, and not be someone who's like, oh, well, I got to make sure I don't fail.
Yeah.
Right. The way to like ensure that you don't get where you're supposed to go is be so afraid of the outcome.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good, G. So here's the beautiful thing about that analogy I was giving. So if you fail and then you eventually figure it out, whatever, it could be a number of different things that you finally get to the point you're going to enter that next level. So now you've finally achieved your goal or your dream. And guess what? Now you get to start again, because when you get to that level, you're like, oh, wait, now I got to figure out taxes. Now I got to figure out, I'm putting in more time into this. How can we multiply? Can we scale?
It's the players like you were talking about in the league. It's like, man, my dream's to be in the MLB. And maybe you're a high school player like me that had no idea. You just thought you were going to get drafted straight to the majors.
That's why baseball didn't work out for you, huh, G?
And then you end up in single A, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna get out of this league, and I'm gonna make it. They're gonna see me, and I'm gonna get called up. And then you just go to the next league. And in each phase, there's something that you learn that takes you back to a different starting line. But you went to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly the point. So that's the cycle. Now, here's the thing. We talked about it like it all happens so automatically. Don't worry. We're going to give you the key qualities that you need in order to bust yourself out of that phase, because you can be stuck in dream mode forever. Yeah. You can be the guy talking about like, yeah, man, I'm going to do this and this and this. And it's like, okay, like when? When's that going to happen?
Right. Look, these are going to be parallels, right? So it's a cycle.
Yeah.
Dream, failure, recovery. This is the step you're at in the cycle. And what we're going to talk about next is in each of those steps in the cycle, here's who you need to be. Here's what you need to focus on.
Yeah. And there's a little bit of underlying quality that we're going to give these qualities, but there's a little something special. This is the secret sauce you had in the SEAL teams.
I've talked about this and I'm so grateful for those of you that I get to meet and other places and outside of some of my normal world, you guys who have listened to my keynote, Foundations of an Unstoppable Team. You remember this, right? I do an acronym for team, and I hope you feel acknowledged for those of you who've told me, right? I met you guys at some of these talks, and you're like, oh, I listen to your show. Like that, I love hearing that. And when Nick's with me, he loves to hear that. It so encourages us. And one of the things I talk about in that keynote is, Foundations of an Unstoppable Team. It's an acronym for team. So I talk about the TEA and M in team, but then I say, but there's a little bit of secret sauce, right? This is what I learned from the SEAL teams about how to have a great team. And I'm like, but I got one more thing.
I'm on the edge of my seat. I
got one more thing. And it was this phrase that I heard all the time. Really helped me level up in my life, right? You got to understand, like SEAL team is one of the most impressive brands, greatest organizations, incredible track record for developing leaders. And here's what my leaders would say to me all the time. And I kind of figured out how I kept hearing this, so I stopped doing it because I didn't really want to hear it anymore. But I would ask a question, or I would be stuck on a challenge, and I won't use the same words that they use because they were in French, but they would say to me, figure it the heck out.
Yeah.
And this is one of the greatest leadership organizations in the world. Consistent track record for every year producing great leaders. And I had some of my leaders say to me, why don't you figure it the heck out? And I will tell you, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, what world you're in, whether we're talking about your finances, your marriage, you've got to have, it is the secret sauce. Every single person has to have some of this quality of you're going to get stuck, and a figure it the heck out quality is like, man, I don't know how to do this. Nobody around here is helping me with this. And so I'm just going to get after it. Instead of like, if you are an employer, like if you are an employee and you want to make your employer really, really mad at you, just the next time you get corrected, say, nobody told me how to do this.
Yeah.
Right. Because, I don't say that facetiously, but every person who's been a business owner who has started something, they've had to go down a road where they had to figure it out. And you're asking them, I'm just giving you some understanding. You're asking your employer to help you with something that no one helped them do.
Yeah.
And they do need to help you, right? And I'm not saying that they're the business owner. They have ultimate responsibility. But I'm saying if you want to grow, if you want to be one of those types of people, if you want to be a business owner, you want to grow to your next level, when you're saying, hey, nobody told me how to do this, that is a formula. That's a recipe for how to stay where you are.
For sure. I will say when you start to see problems and challenges as opportunities, you have just leveled up your mindset in a way that unfortunately very few people do. Because they say necessity is the mother of all invention. So many times I sit there, like I said earlier in this podcast, and I look back at my problems and I'm so grateful for them.
Do you know how the rotary phone was invented?
I do not, but you look like you want to tell me.
I don't remember their names, but the rotary phone was invented by a guy who he had a product that he sold, and he had a competitor in his town that also sold this same product. It was related to sewing, I think is what it was. I think it was like a sewing needle product. And people would call in to the operator and ask for his business. But his competitor's wife was an operator, a telephone operator. So every time someone would call in and looking for his business, his competitor's wife would be, oh, great. And she'd plug him in to her husband's business. And he figured out this was happening because he started hearing from people, and he was losing all of his business to this. And so this guy selling like a sewing needle deal created the rotary phone, which went on to be wildly successful because he said, you know what? I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to solve this problem.
Talk about adventures and missing the point, right? like, I'm here to sell sewing needles. Actually, you're going to change the whole world by developing a rotary phone. That's amazing. I haven't heard that before, man. I love that. Hey, thank God for problems. Right. And you actually just talked about this from your mindset. You gave a little mindset download, which I hope you all enjoyed, getting Garrett's perspective on some things. That was a little short episode that we just released. So if you haven't listened to it, listen to it because he switches up on problems.
So let's get on to these qualities.
All right. So here's the qualities. This is how to kick yourself out of whatever cycle. So if you're in the first phase of the cycle, which is dream, and we'll just say for these cycles, there's no time limit on these things. Like the dream, failure, recovery, it's not like you will be in this cycle for roughly 3 to 5 months. There's nothing like that. But if you're stuck in dream mode, this is so underrated.
Just real quick, the other way to look at these pieces of the cycle, just to give a little bit more foundation, and then we'll move on. The other way to look at these pieces of the cycle, because Nick, you're saying like, this could be 3 to 5 months, it could be 3 to 5 minutes.
Right.
Look at these 3 pieces and then these 3 qualities that we're talking about. The other way of looking at it is like building a house or building a tower. And it's like you can't build one of these out of proportion to the other.
Yeah, very good.
You got to strengthen one. You got to strengthen the second one. Okay, number 1 and 2 are getting really big. I got to work on number 3.
Yeah.
And so in the same way, this can be like an iterative cycle, like a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's also going to be something of like, oh man, I got lots of number 1. I need to work on number 2. Right? You're building all of these qualities together.
Yeah, and the idea being that you're going to go through this little mini growth cycle so many times that at the end of your life, the compound growth is going to be just far more than you could have imagined.
Because you need each one of these to be at a certain threshold to make it to the next level.
Yeah.
If you have a lot of quality 1 and 2, but you're not picking up quality number 3, you're not going to be able to go to your next level.
Yeah, very good. All right, so quality 1, you cut me off right as I was at the climax. That's why I was laughing, because I was like, and it's really underrated. And then you're like, oh, wait, one more thing. So yeah, to kick you out of dream mode, and this is so underrated, is clarity. Man, I will tell you that my man Tony Robbins, oh, no, that was almost, there we go. My man Tony Robbins says, clarity is power. And I can't do a good Tony Robbins. But like, you hear that and you're like,
you need vocal cords twice the size.
Oh, I really do. He is a massive man. But like you hear that term, clarity is power, and you go like, okay, yeah. I'm telling you, when you actually experience clarity, you'll understand why it kicks you out of dream mode, because clarity is the level of sharpness that you have about what you see. Clarity will prioritize and mobilize you. It'll prioritize the right things so you're not paying attention to the wrong ones, and it'll mobilize you to action towards those right things. And I can't tell you how powerful it is. For example, in your health, how many people are like, man, I want to get in better shape? Okay, good. That's a start. That to me would be a dream. You want to kick out of the dream and make it so that you just start getting moving. Get clarity. What exactly do you want your body to look like? When you can start to see yourself wearing that shirt that you thought and filling it out the way that you like, or getting into that size jeans or whatever it is, and the way you look on the beach, and you can start to picture the cut of your muscles, and you can start to think like, man, I want shoulders like this. I'm speaking as a guy. I want my chest like this. I actually want to be able to see my abs. When you start getting that level of clarity, guess what? It's going to put you into a whole different place, because now whenever it's like, oh man, I'm tired, it'd be great to just have a bag of chips and comfort eat. No, because you've seen something. And the great thing about seeing something is you can't unsee it.
How clear you can see that picture.
Yes.
Right. Because like for me in my own story, that was as a teenager going from, hey, I want to do something that's cool. I want to do something that matters. I want to do like secret agent stuff. I feel like I have abilities to do those types of things. And I think a lot of young people, teenagers, are like, I don't want to do like the office job route. And that's where I was at. I was like, man, I don't want to do that.
Right.
And I was like, okay, maybe I'm not a professional athlete. So what else can I do that's like going to use the skills God's given me? And so then I see Navy SEAL, and that it strikes me. I'm like, this is it. And I got very clear on all of that dream that I had became a very clear object of this is what I'm after. And the path, and for that specific path, not every path is this way, but there is a very linear, this is the only way path to become a Navy SEAL.
Yeah, I imagine that you just Googled where can you have massive amounts of violence and aggression and make yourself more valuable, and it's like Navy SEALs, great, off you went. So, but the point I was making about that, like I gave you in the health, this is going to lead so clearly into quality too, which we're going to get to here shortly. But like in your marriage, for example, if you say I want to have a better marriage, you know what that could mean? Well, maybe I'm just going to try and be a little nicer. I'll get her flowers one day. Whereas if you start to go, no, I actually want to start having fun with my wife. I want our marriage to be something that we're deeply connected. We go on adventures together. She's my best friend. She's my number one confidant.
Man, this
very
is
different.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because this is a huge one for marriage.
Yeah.
Because you like saying, I want to have a good marriage, like just kick rocks, dude, right? You're going to make zero progress with that. You just walk around in circles. But when you start saying like, this is the dream I have for our family. This is the way I want my wife to feel about me. This is what I want our communication to look like. When we go through challenges, this is the way that I want us to handle them. With me and my own marriage, with my wife, Lindsay, I knew very clearly. I'd seen some great pictures of what I wanted. I'd seen some great pictures of what I didn't want. Mm-hmm. And it made it very easy for me, not easy to make the decisions, but easy to know what the right step is. You're going to have to pay a price for whatever your dream is. Yeah. Right. And you make your dream accomplishing your dreams. It's hard no matter what. What makes it nearly impossible is if you don't actually know what to do. Yeah. Right. And so when I got really clear on what I wanted my marriage to look like, at least I knew what the right decision was. It didn't make the right decision easy, but at least I knew what the right decision was.
Yeah, it's so good, G. And I would encourage you, if you're going like, well, great, well, how do I get clarity? I mean, you talk about you got to see some models. You got to be looking around, right? I always say that people have to see first in order to believe. And
hey, hang out with us next month in Mindset Mastery, because we're going to talk about awareness and core values.
We are, yeah, actually, and that's that. We're going to really jump into that one. I'm looking forward to it. But I always say you got to see first to believe, and obviously clarity is part of seeing. Well, where are you going to see? You got to be looking around. Either you're going to see it internally or externally. Some people are in some bad situations where they don't have a lot of hope around them, so they got to go out and find it. But I would encourage you that no matter who you are and where you are, you can always see by getting into prayer, praying and getting into the presence of God. My father-in-law, who's a great man of God, I married the best woman in the world, and she happened to come handy with a powerful little Welshman who loves Jesus and is very just a man of God. And he shared this line with me recently. He said, vision, which is your anchor, is seeing the mind of God in the presence of God. And I know vision is separate to clarity, but when he said that, I actually texted to a couple of my friends and just said, check out this one-liner, because I just thought that was so powerful. So if you're looking for clarity in things, I'm going to always encourage people to pray and to get into God's presence, because you will never get better clarity and see more than whenever you're in his presence.
Gwen's a mighty man of God indeed.
Oh man, little powerhouse. All right, and so we've alluded to it without saying it, because we've talked about what happens when you have this level of clarity. You're not going to eat the chips. You're going to start picturing how you're going to treat your wife, which means you're going to start putting some things in place.
So clarity is the quality for the dream phase of the cycle.
That will kick you into failure, and then it's going to be like, oh wait, shoot, now it's not working. Well, what do you need to get out of failure? You need standards, G, right?
When you fail, it can either mean that it's over, right, or you learn what to do, you learn what's required to go on to the next level. Standards are the things. The way that I look at standards is you gotta have this understanding. And Nick and I talk about the stuff that we talk about on the show all the time. And it's part of the reason this show is, I wouldn't say easy for us, but it comes very naturally to us because the things we're talking about here on the show is the kind of stuff that we talk about.
Yeah, it's literally our life.
So we talk about all the time. And one of the things we talk about all the time is principles. We're not talking about principles today, but I'm going to talk about principles for just a second. Principles govern outcomes. And when you understand the way that principles work, you know what's going to happen. The Wright brothers understood the principles of flight before anybody else did. And you know what it did? It made them remembered in history for forever.
Yeah.
It made them wildly successful. And they're the same way that there are physical, tangible principles, things like gravity that govern outcomes in the world. There are things that govern outcomes in your relationships, that govern outcomes in your marriage. And you can't see them or study them in the same way that you can study gravity. And by the way, scientists don't really even fully understand how the force of gravity works.
Right.
They know what it does, but they can't even replicate it. They don't know specifically. There's things about gravity that are still a mystery today. But we just know if you do this, this will happen. There are still mysteries to gravity. There are parts of principles that will be a mystery to you for forever. But when you study principles, you understand there are patterns.
Right.
If this happens, then this will happen. And I say this to say, you've got to understand that the world is unforgiving. Gravity never takes a day off.
Right.
It is always that way. And if that should seem very clear for people to understand. If you can understand that the principles of gravity work the same way, understand that the principles of things like integrity work the same way.
Very good.
And this strong sense of governance is what leads you to a great sense of value later on. Again, Wright brothers figured out what governed flight, paid off massively for them. You moving into a greater understanding of principles in your life, whether it's principles about technology or it's principles about relationships, is going to have massive payoffs for you. And one of the big revelations of principles is that it governs outcomes. It doesn't change. There's no mercy to principles. And you need to, so bringing principles back to standards, principles is what governs outcomes. Standards is how you govern yourself. And if you want to have the power that gravity has in the way that you govern yourself, you've got to be just as harsh. Again, gravity doesn't take a day off. So in your standards, and we'll talk a little bit more specifically here, I just wanted to set this up on standards. Standards will pay off for you when you are unrelenting about them the same way that gravity is as a principle.
Yeah, and what I love about that is so many people don't think of standards that way, and you've experienced true standards in the SEAL teams.
It's how you overcome failure. You've got to be more unrelenting than the failure is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So great point here, Jay. G, what is a standard? Well, there's three things that make a standard. It's black and white, right? This isn't like an objective thing like, well, I think my standard is that I'm going to work out.
Standards are not based on feelings.
Correct. They're black and white, they're intentional, and they do not change. Not ever. Never, 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 never. You have a great way that you talk about standards versus rules, because most people, when they say standards,
yes, standards
they
have
mean
to be
rules.
very clear to you. Here's just when it's not so much about that you know the difference between rules and standards, but when I separate them for people, it helps it makes the standards seem so much more clear, because you might be blending in your mind standards and rules. Rules, just like one of my favorite movies, The Matrix, says, some rules are meant to be bent, other rules are meant to be broken. Rules can be bent and broken. Sometimes breaking a rule has a payoff. And the one that I use, and if you are an 18-year-old driver, don't borrow this from me, but one of the rules that I use as an example, because I think people can relate to it, is that speeding is a rule, and it's also a law. Right. And if you break that law, there are consequences. The consequences don't go away. But there may be a time where the speed limit says 75, and you think driving 80 is worth the risk of increasing the speed. The time that I'm going to get back from driving 80 instead of driving 75, I think may be worth the risk of increasing my speed, right? And so the consequence doesn't go away, but there's potentially value in breaking that rule. Rules are a good general governship for civilizations and societies. Like, hey, this is a good general rule of thumb. You should do this, right? And that's what rules are. Standards are not the same as rules. Standards are things that have zero value or zero payoff in breaking them. They protect you. You can look at rules as like the center of the road, and standards are the guardrails. Right. You get over this, it's consequences every single time. There's nothing to be gained. On a road through the Rocky Mountains, there is nothing to be gained on getting over the guardrails here. It is nothing but severe consequences. in the SEAL teams, there were rules that we used in combat that could be broken. There were also really clear standards, like never, ever, ever, for any reason, ever point your weapon at one of your teammates. There's no reason to do it. Don't shoot one of your teammates. Pretty clear, right? There's no value to be gained in that, and not even if there's you've clear and safe the weapon. Even if your hands not on the weapon, your fingers not on the trigger. Never point a weapon at your teammate. There is zero value to be gained from that. That's a standard. That's military. A practical standard in my own life is you'll never hear me raise my voice at my wife. Yeah. There is nothing to be gained from that, right? It's not like, oh, I should generally not do that, but maybe sometimes like the risk is worth it. There is nothing to be gained for me raising my voice out of anger at my wife.
Yeah, that's so good, man. I love that distinction between rules and standards. And you may be sitting there going like, okay, wait, so standards are going to kick me out of failure? Yes, because here's the good thing. As you grow, so do the standards. Like you as the Navy SEALs have very different standards than an enlisted guy who's just going to go be working a random job somewhere in the Navy.
Just because you have a dream and you've got clarity on that dream doesn't mean that you're yet worthy of it.
Right.
And the standards are what's going to level you up.
Right.
Right. You got some clarity in your dreams about your marriage. Well, the difference between you and the marriage that you want to have is you raising your standards.
Yeah. So good. And you could put that towards health. You could put that towards finance. That's part of the figure it the heck out is you're going to figure out the things that when you break them, there's never a benefit. And then you're going to start putting those standards in place. I never have credit card debt. That's something for me. Yeah. I don't carry credit card debt.
It's saying I'm never going to lie to my spouse.
Right.
There's really not anything to be gained in that. And if you don't have any of those kind of standards, it's probably why you have the marriage that you do.
Right.
You've got to understand that standards are the things that are going to level you up. Yeah, some rules are good, but rules are not the things that are going to help you. Rules help a society help understand like where's the middle, what's the middle of the road look like.
Yeah.
You've got to make some decisions on here's what I'll never do.
Which is great. So you've raised your standards, you've gotten out of failure, and now you get to recovery, right? And so what's going to help you with figuring it out and kick you up to your next level? Because remember, you got to go through all three of these, and then you arrive back at the next dream. That's when you really get to the next level. You got to get through all three of these phases. So you're in recovery, you figured it out, you've set your standards, but oh wait, that's not everything, Gene.
Here's the thing about standards. Standards in your marriage. Let me talk I know I love that we have both men and women listening to this podcast. Love you both. Let me talk just to the men for a second.
We have a lot more men.
Men, you raise your standards in your marriage, and you do it for a day, and you do it for a week, and you do it for a month, and you're like, hey, man, like talking to your wife, like, when am I going to get some respect around here? Like, when's some of this stuff going to start paying off? I don't know if you noticed what I've been doing, but I've been doing all the things that I'm supposed to do.
You see me? I'm a really good husband.
It's easy to have that attitude, and you can't control your spouse. You can influence them. You can't control them. And so those standards, this is about taking you to your next level, right? And you grow to your next level, your marriage is going to go there. Your marriage isn't just you. There's somebody else in your marriage, and you can't control them. But where you've got, and marriage is a very practical example for this, where you've got to have some faith is that I'll do my part. Yeah. I'm going to be my best for God, and I'm just believing that either by a stroke of lightning or my wife getting some awareness or some weird email shows up, or God just, impresses upon her heart that maybe she's going to decide, hey, I'll grow too. Hey, I'll change too. And if you got a lot of credit with your wife, which you'll get, not in a month of time, but over years, if you develop some credit with your wife, maybe you can have some of these conversations where you can say to your wife, I'm not encouraging everyone to do this, but if you're in a place where you've got some credit with your wife, that's where you can sit down and say, hey, I'd like to talk. If you've got anything that you'd like me to change, I want you to tell me, but I would like to talk with you if you're okay about it, about some things that I'd like you to grow in.
Yeah.
If you got some credit with your wife, you can have that conversation, right? If you want your marriage to go to the next level, it is going to take both of you, but you cannot control her. And that's where the faith component here in this cycle, right? You've got to get all these pieces right. And faith is what faith is you trusting God.
Yes.
God, I'm going to do my part, right?
Yeah.
I love one of the great analogies in the Bible. It's a very literal example for us to talk about in what life looks like is planting a seed.
Yeah.
And if you think about what a seed is, it is kind of wild. Like if you hold a seed in your hand, like this little thing could become something that's so great.
Yeah.
And like in this tiny little seed, this is an olive tree. This is a an oak tree. This is a strawberry plant. Like it could become,
amazing.
it's just this tiny little speck, and it could become all of these things. And what did you actually do? You put it in the dirt and you poured some water on it.
Right.
Right? You didn't make the seed. You don't like tell the seed to grow. You don't activate any of its genes. Like the part that we do, like honestly seems so extremely rudimentary.
Right.
It's like a 5-year-old, you know, working in a mechanic shop with his dad, and he thinks that he's helping.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, you're not, thank you. Like, I got it.
Right.
Right? Like this, you know, and so I say that to say, like, the seed is such an example of, hey, you do your little part, right? You plant the seed in the ground, do it at the right time, right? You got to understand the principles of seed sowing, understand the principles of farming for whatever, you know, your farming analogy is. But then God's got to do the actually special part and turn this little seed into something great, into something mighty. And if you get into this mindset of, I'll plant this seed if you tell me what this seed's going to become,
Right.
you're not going to get very far.
Very
That's transactional thinking.
Yes.
Transactional thinking is, I'll do this if you do that. And I'm not saying that transactional doesn't mean sinful. Okay. Transactional is not inherently bad. When you go to the gas pump, it's a transaction, right? I will give you dollars. You give me gas. It's okay.
Yeah.
Right. Like, don't just keep putting dollars into a machine that's not giving you anything back. Right.
Some top-notch advice there, G.
Should probably stop that.
Yeah.
I don't think anything's happening.
That's also known as gambling.
Exactly. Yeah, not a slots guy here. But anyways, that's transactional thinking, where you're saying, like, I'll do this and you do that. And again, transactions are not inherently wrong. But if you want to really be great, if you want to grow to your next level, this is a part of life that you've got to understand. You can stay stuck in the line. You can just live a transactional life and you'll get transactional outcomes. And here's what I can tell you about transactional outcomes. You got to pay for every brick in the wall, and you're not going to build a very big castle by yourself.
Right.
Right. Transformational thinking is where you have the opportunity for things to be multiplied. Transformational thinking is where, like, man, all I've got is this tiny little seed that's worth a nickel, and I got some God-made sunlight and some God-made water that I'm going to pour onto it.
Yeah.
And it's going to turn into something that's worth, you know, one little nickel of a seed is going to turn into something that's worth dollars and worth tens of dollars, where God can absolutely multiply you. And that's because you did your part, and then you entered into an equation that, and by the way, these are the equations that God wants you in. Because what God wants most for us is our maturity. God wants you to trust Him, right? God, everything God's doing in your life is for His kingdom, and is for you to grow and mature as a person so that you can become who He created you to be. Right. God, if you look at God's creation, there's this cycle of health and growth and maturity. And we're the same way. And God centered creation around us, His children. So what God wants most for you is to mature. And so He's putting us in equations. These are the great equations for you to be a part of, where it requires us to trust in Him.
Yeah.
Transactional living does not mature you.
Right.
You got to make some transactions in life, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with them. But those things don't mature you. Transformational living, it not only does it mature you, but it leads to multiplication of outcomes.
Yeah, that's so good. You said so many things in there that are just massive nuggets. And it really is one of the hardest things to just be like, okay, I'm going to trust you, God. Because so much, like you said, a transaction is like, well, if you do this, then I'll do that. And God's just going, no, you're going to do this. Well, when's it going to happen? Oh, you didn't hear an answer back?
This is, it's Daniel chapter 3, right, where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are about to get thrown into the fire. And they say to the king, basically, you know, this is Daniel chapter 3, verse 17 and 18. Essentially what they say to the king is, what, you know, our God is going to rescue us from the fire. Yeah. Even if He doesn't, we're not bowing down to you.
Yes.
And so they didn't pray a prayer to God and say, God, if you promise to, you know, not let us get incinerated, we'll stand up to the king. Yeah. No, they knew who God was, and they stood up to the king and they said, we're going to honor God. Right. And even if He does, we believe He's going to rescue us from this fire, but even if He doesn't, we're not bowing down to you.
Yeah. Trust means that you don't need to know how, and it also means that even if it doesn't work out the way you think it should, you're still going to believe in God just the same way you did as if it came the way you wanted to. And that is a very simple, not easy thing to do, but that's truly, I mean, Abraham, Genesis 15:6, right, says, and Abraham believed what the Lord said, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Yes. He's the father of faith, and God's telling a 75-year-old dude, don't worry, you're going to have more descendants than the stars. And at this point, you're already past childbearing age, and you got nothing. And he goes, okay, I believe you. He didn't go like, well, wait a minute, like when's this going to happen? Or could you tell me what? It was just okay, great. And after that, look what happened. He still didn't get it perfect.
20 years.
Right. Yeah. 25. Yeah. It was 20 more years after.
Yeah.
It was 20. Yeah. So, I mean, and then you think about that. How many times would that break people? But that is actual trust.
Yeah, most people after 2 months is like, God, you've abandoned me.
Right. And here's the thing. Sometimes you have to be okay. God may not answer you. He doesn't owe you any answer.
Yeah.
Or he may give you the answer you don't like. And you have to be faithful in that. Faithfulness is always the test. We've said it before. So faith is what's going to kick you out of recovery. And then guess what? You're back into dream mode. And that's where you're like, you're at your next level.
You made it to the next level.
Which is your new incompetence.
It's like you did all of this work to make it to the promised land, and you get there, and you're like, okay, well, what now?
Now you got to fight all these guys and get them out.
Now you got to get some clarity on what's the next level.
Right.
What's the new dream?
Very good. Yeah. All right. So I hope that's helped y'all is to win right where you're at right now. There's a lot of nuggets in there, G. So I don't know if there's anything you want to say to people before we see them all again soon.
I would just encourage you to not be frustrated, not be disappointed, not be let down by finding your incompetencies.
Very good.
Right? Be someone who knows that I'm not an incompetent person. I'm an overcomer. And so when I go to my next level, I know what it takes. I got to go through this cycle. These are some qualities that I got to work on. But now I know this is all that's required of me to grow to where God wants to have me.